The General Laws and Technology Committee, the last one prior to crossover, will come to order here. Thanks to hard work of the committee and everybody else, the last 2 weeks we spent 9 hours straight, 5 hours 2 weeks ago, 4 hours last week. And the reward is we actually should be able to get this meeting done in a relatively short period of time. So with the open the board for taking roll call.
You have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
All right, we have a quorum. Let me just do a couple of quick things. Senator McDougall would like his bill, Senate Bill 747, stricken. Is there?
So moved.
All right, we got a motion and a second to strike Senator McDougall's bill. If there's no discussion, we'll vote on the board.
Strike everything.
All right.
He's in court.
Yeah.
You need to tell him.
All right.
Ayes
Mr.
11,
Mr.
no
Chairman?
0.
Mr. Chairman?
11, no, 0. Yeah, stricken. Yes.
If you want to make it quicker, I'd like to strike 312 as well.
312. All right. I told you we're on a roll there, so
Just don't say I didn't give it the office here.
you worked hard. So, all right. A motion to strike the bill, Senate Bill 312. All right. All right.
Ayes 12, no 0.
Ayes 12, no 0. That bill is stricken. Senate Bill 224 from Senator McPike. He's not here today, but he wants to have that one just carried over for the year. All right, is there a second? All right, motion and a second. Let's vote on carryover for the year.
Ayes 12, no 0.
All right, and then the other one is Senator Morrissey's Senate Bill 410, also to carry over for the year. Is there a motion?
Second.
All right, motion and a second. If there's no discussion, we'll vote on the board. All right. Okay, we will now move into.
Ayes 12, no 0.
Okay, whose bill do we want to strike now? So, yeah. All right, Senator Hager, you can lead off here. So.
Okay, thank you. There's no time to PBI one, is it? It's just
That's it. We're just drawing lots up here. See what,
okay.
when
Thank
it comes up. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Yeah.
I have Senate Bill 400 in front of you this afternoon, Mr. Chairman. This deals with ag building exemptions. As you're aware, in order to foster and preserve our agriculture industry, there are certain exemptions that we provide in different areas. One of those areas we're dealing with this session, which has had some misinterpretations and abuse, are like farm use tags. So we're running a bill through that will basically make sure that those who use farm use tags are entitled to do that, and we've developed a process through the DMV to do that. Separate bill. But the point is, the ag industry has come together in support of bills like this in order to be able to preserve the integrity of the exemptions that are there. This deals with event-type buildings, agritourism event buildings, and Mr. Chairman, I have one amendment to offer, which has consensus. This bill anticipates creating a board under the Housing and Community Development to promulgate regulations. And in the bill as introduced, there are certain people that would be a part of that board that are going to work on as an advisory committee, a technical advisory committee. So we want to increase it to 8 members and add the Virginia Fire Services Board to that, because that's one of the concerns is fire safety in these types of structures. So there is an amendment that I believe council has, staff has here, and I would like to offer that amendment. Or it's probably on your electronic gadgets already. Is that right? Okay. Good.
DLS thanks you for noting that. Thank you.
All right, we have a motion and a second to adopt the amendment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The amendment is adopted.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. As we look at the bill, there are a number of issues there where we want to basically, apart from the exemption, we want to be able to control safety features for gatherings open to the public of 300 people or less. And then in the other areas, we're going to continue to work on that. That 300 is a number that I have agreed to with a number of stakeholders. There, I think you might hear, if you have time to hear from people that would like that number to be lower, but actually that is the number that I agreed to in the legislation here. But then there, as you see in front of you in the bill, is a requirement for outward swinging doors, panic hardware, emergency vehicle access, portable fire extinguishers for purposes of fire suppression. One of the areas that certainly would be a sticking point in rural areas, we don't want mandated in the building code that these types of structures out in the country have like fire suppression that would include sprinkler systems, as an example, which are impractical in these types of settings. So that's the bill, and there may be a number of people that would like to speak to it.
Senator Hanger, what was the number you referenced that would be, I guess, on line 16?
For the amendment, the amendment, well, actually, a part of the amendment is a clarification on agritourism on line 14 to strike agritourism on 14 and say as used in this section agritourism.
All right.
And then on line 26, because we're adding one member, you change 7 to 8.
Right.
And also on, there are a couple instances where you need to change that number. And then on line 29, after association, add the Virginia Fire Services Board. So they would have a representative on this particular board under the Board of Housing and Community Development.
And what was the number you said you agreed to in terms of number of people?
300.
300, okay. And that's in the...
That's in the introduced bill.
In the introduced bills. I just
Right.
didn't know whether that was a different number or the
Right.
same one that was there.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I spoke with a patron earlier, and I would like to propose a minor amendment. I've asked for this clarification from Loudoun County, and I like the bill. I don't want to do harm to the bill. I think it's a friendly amendment. If it's all right, I'll just read the one change, and then I'll hand this paper to the patron so he can see it. Proposing this amendment would be to give a little bit more clarification on line 15, 16. So at the end of line 15, it says, which is primarily, so we would delete the word primarily. And then before that word, after takes place, we would add, which meets the definition of farm building or structure as defined in Code 36-97. So I'm going to pass this to the patron, but it just makes sure we follow the definition of farm building or structure and gets rid of primarily, because I've heard feedback they would have trouble knowing what primarily is. So if it's used for it, it's used for it.
All right.
Mr. Chair, the first amendment that I offered is I would like adopted. This one, I would like to look at it closely and then have some reaction from some of the stakeholders to see whether they agree. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, while they're reading that, Senator Hanger is, Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
is Farm Bureau
Senator
on board?
Yeah.
Yes. In fact, they're reviewing this amendment here right now, and
I didn't see Martha. I was just curious. Okay.
got Andrew here.
Mr. Chairman, may I,
Yes.
speaking to the amendment, if it's okay with Senator Bell, Mr.
Certainly.
Chairman? So the concern I have with this is the reason we drafted this the way we did and agonized over it is the use of the word primarily is also located in 36-97 when it comes to farm building or structure, which has caused some consternation and confusion. That part is true. And we've worked on it for those that are familiar and have heard this debate before. I think you've seen a bill similar to this in 2018 and again earlier than that. My concern is which meets the definition, where it takes place meets the definition of farm building or structure, it could be read, and I would need to look at this, doing it on the fly, Senator Bell, but you could be setting up a conflict in the code in which a farm building is exempt and it is also being cited here where it is not exempt, would be my concern with that. I would want to have council look at that and see if that is correct or not, as I am not a lawyer. But that would be my concern, is that we are setting up a dual thing. I'm certainly willing to work with you on it to see if we can reach clarification as to
Mr. Chairman?
what they're trying to get at.
Yes, Senator Bell.
I understand that, and as I said, I don't want to do harm for the bill because I like the bill. How about would you be, if we just had deleted the word primarily and didn't do the rest of it?
Again, Mr. Chairman, Senator Bell, because the word primarily is used in the farm building and structure, where we run into problems is that there are a lot of mixed-use buildings. They're used sometimes for events, sometimes for ag, and this is essentially true where things like farm store is attached to where production is taking place. In the winery industry, you have your cellar in which you have wine barrels and underneath in your event space up top. And so the reason we tried to mirror it with the farm building exemption was for that purpose, to say that the locality could say it's either primarily, it's one or the other. You're primarily used for a farm building and you're exempt, or you're primarily used for one or the other. And I would hate to bring, again, I would like to look at it some more and have council tell me whether that is correct or not. I understand exactly what you're trying to do, and this is the problem with this type of bill we've run into for year after year since I've been here trying to figure this out. Because we've acknowledged there's a safety concern. I just want to make sure we're being clear what we're trying to do. And Mr. Chairman, we worked with lots of stakeholders, including Senator Bell in the past, and knows that I understand what he's trying to get at, and I really do want to work to get to where he's going.
Mr. Chairman, I know you want to hold public debate on this, and I would just ask the patron, I don't want to rush to do this right now because I want stakeholders to read it. I'd be willing to proceed forward, and we can still address it. We still have time. I'm comfortable with that.
All right, so the amendment is not offered by Senator Bell there, and the patron and the stakeholders will weigh in on it later. So, all right, that is fine. Anybody want to speak to the bill, regardless of whether it's opposition or.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Andrew Smith, Virginia Farm Bureau Federation. We do support the bill as introduced and okay with Senator Hanger's amendments. Do have concern with the amendment offered to Senator Bell. I'll be a little bit more blunt. That, as Kyle said, that primarily does for the agricultural structures, the farm structures, it's primarily used for the 6 purposes outlined in code, an administrative code. And we encourage that you stick with the primarily for the purposes in the bill, because what we as farmers and landowners in rural area that are using the structures that under the code now, they're used for the farm purposes. They may build them themselves, or they get somebody in there, and they don't meet the typical standards that a warehouse that you may have the general public in. But we are seeing people that are buying rural land, putting up a structure and inviting, having it as a venue. And that's what we think is, once these things up, it's kind of too late. So we think that there should be some safety standards in place that we have outlined in here. So,
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Senator Bell.
I appreciate that. And again, I support the concept, and I appreciate this. It's a big step forward, and this is a hard one. I'm just concerned about when does it primarily take effect? Because, I know friends who have property in big barns, and they've had weddings, other stuff, sometimes just because people wanted to use it. So when does the primary kick in? Because they had structures they weren't planning on using for these things till people started asking them. And I wouldn't want them to get caught up in this and that kind of a situation. So that's really what I'm shooting for.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, I completely understand as said before. Kyle Shreve on behalf of the Agribusiness Council, just to walk through a few other things that we tried to model after. As Senator Hanger said, there is some requirements already in the building code dealing with rural churches because the rural areas do have differing needs when it comes to safety standards, and so we tried to lean on precedent as much as possible. And what we pulled out to make sure this comes up to code is, or some type of code, is modeled after what is already there for things like amusement devices. It is not unprecedented that you have set out special things to say, we want to make sure that we make this clear, and that's what we tried to base it on as much as possible so that we're not reinventing the wheel. One last thing that I will say, the 300 or less I know has caused a lot of people a lot of consternation. It was a number that was negotiated on our behalf. I know there is consternation, but we are not trying to get away with anything. If anybody builds anything bigger than 300 or more, we actually tried to set this up to bring them into full code. If you're going to spend that much money on a building structure that is primarily used for events, then you ought to put in the new tank and pump system needed to operate this. As Senator Hanger alluded to, you cannot run a sprinkler system off of regular brown wells they have in rural Virginia, and that's what we're trying to get at with this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else who wants to speak to the bill?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I'm Ann Lee Kerr here on behalf of the Virginia Wineries Association. We have appreciate all the work that Senator Hanger did on this with us. Senator Bell, we do have a problem with changing the word primarily. Happy to discuss that with both of you. For us, you think of a situation where you have a winery that might have, and I think Kyle alluded to it, you might have some where we do the storage of the wine or somewhere, and you might have a dinner every now and then in that area. So we were using the primarily to get at, that's a place where you might have 2 dinners or 2 somethings in a year or 2 years, and so the primary purpose of that is the storage of wine in the vats in that area. And you look at the other places like, at King Family Vineyards or Veritas Vineyards where you have an event structure that is there not just primarily, but all for having a wedding or having some sort of that. So we were trying to discern between those 2 types where, at least for the Wineries Association, something that is for the weddings, for those types of events would fall into this. But if it's just a occasional use, and if the Loudon folks have a better way of saying that, I'd be happy to look into that. But that's why we were using primarily.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to speak?
Mr. Chairman, we have 3 people wishing to speak virtually.
All right, that sounds fine.
Thomas,
Bring them up.
Thomas Dickerson, please unmute and begin your testimony, followed by Keith Johnson.
Hello. Hopefully you can hear me. Yes. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Thomas Dickerson, and it's an honor to speak with you today as a private citizen solely. I have a technical concern that the provisions in Senate Bill 400 will actually be moot or have no real effect unless the bill is amended to include additional language that addresses the current wording of the farm building exemption in Virginia Code, Section 3699, paragraph B, as well as the discussion of farm building in Section 36-97. In my reading of current law, a building constructed to serve primarily as an event space must comply with the building code, regardless of whether that building is located on a farm or not. While Virginia does have a farm building exemption that can apply to certain buildings when used as described in the current code, it's my interpretation that a building used primarily as an event space would not meet the definition of a farm building under current law. As a result, such a building would already be subject to a more rigorous set of structural and fire safety standards under the current building code. Therefore, the language in Senate Bill 400 is moot, despite the fact that it would allow for a set of safety measures. The measures that are in the current building code would actually still apply. Therefore, the measures in Senate Bill 400 they're irrelevant or they're moot. They don't really have any bearing. So, just in summary, the underlying public policy question here really is whether structures serving as event spaces for gatherings of up to 300 people or however many people, the question is whether they should comply with the building code and whether we like the building code. Do we trust the building code and the county building officials' ability to interpret it is already being carried out correctly?
All right. Thank you for your testimony.
Keith Johnson, please unmute and begin your testimony.
Good afternoon, Senator and committee, and thank you for having me today. My name is Keith Johnson. I'm here representing the Virginia Fire Chiefs Association from the Commonwealth of Virginia. I'm also the local fire chief here in Loudoun County. Today I'm representing the Fire Chiefs Association. By matter of disclosure, I also am a member of the Board of Housing and Community Development and a member of the Virginia Fire Services Board. Mr. Dickerson couldn't have stole my remarks. He is spot on when it comes to that, and I agree with Senator Bell's amendments that were put forth with Loudoun County. Again, we all know the history. In 2018, the General Assembly, the Virginia House and Senate Laws Committee asked for an agritourism committee to be put forward. For over a year, that committee worked on trying to come to some consensus with that. And then really the members of the committee were asked to include requirements for public safety, which is why we're here today to talk about the public safety aspect. What the intent of this bill is to provide farm structures that have exceptions in the code, which require no public safety operations today or components today to have the 6 that you see listed. So basically to take a farm structure that's defined by 3697, as Mr. Dickerson said, and who meet the definition of the exception in Virginia Code 3699 and provide these 6 elements that provide some basic level of public safety, fire safety. So when an event happens, folks can get out of these buildings, outward swinging doors, vehicle access, portable fire extinguishers, an unmonitored fire alarm, evacuation plan. These are common sense things that we need to evacuate a building should something happen. And I think most people within the industry, when those committees came together, agreed with that. Right. What this bill as written would do when we talk about agritourism event building would provide basically a new use group that folks could build a building to this capacity and hold weddings or events in this building strictly without even meeting the definition of a farm structure or building, which is not the intent of this bill. I applaud Senator Hanger and thank him for putting this bill forward because I think he has the intent of public safety and fire safety in mind. But I think as this bill is written with the definition of agritourism event building, that definition is going to provide opportunity for buildings to be built to a separate use group that is not included in the farm structure building definition or by the exception. So I urge you to work with Senator Bell and really take into heart what Mr. Dickerson prior to me had said. So I thank you for the opportunity to speak.
All right, thank you.
Adam Gillenwater, please unmute and begin your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. Adam Gillenwater with the Piedmont Environmental Council. I'd like to thank Senator Hanger for patroning this legislation, and it is legislation that we support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Yes, come forward.
Bonnie Atwood. I represent the Fire Prevention Association. We support this bill and particularly the amendment that was added. And obviously, we want as few people exempt as possible. So if that 300 number could come down, we would be pleased. We also share Chief Johnson's remarks that he made just now. But overall, we support the bill.
All right, thank you. Any further comments? Senator Hanger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If there are none from the public at this point, I would just say that there has been a number of conversations my office has had specifically with Loudoun County, and I would say just in general that the statewide interpretation is not exactly like they are operating in Loudoun County at this point in time. And I'm not saying they're wrong. What I'm saying is that there is a broad exemption out there and that there are event centers being built without code inspection. Now, I'm not saying they are being built substandard. They just are not subject to that. And so this is a step in the right direction, I believe, a strong step in the right direction for safety. And one of the reasons why we're creating this group that will be meeting is to kind of ferret it out to see if we can make it even better. I recognize there's concern the 300, or we can quibble over the words, or maybe quibble is probably not the right word. I'd be glad to continue to work to try to get better language if it's suitable, but I hope that the committee would embrace this concept of closing a loophole essentially right now, so we have basic fire safety provisions in what otherwise might be built exempt from any oversight.
Mr. Chairman,
All right, Senator Stewart.
I commend Senator Hanger on his work on this. This is a tough issue in many respects, and in my opinion, and I do a lot of this work in my legal practice and other areas, he's come up with a really good compromise bill, and I would move that the bill be reported.
All right, there's a motion and a second to report the bill. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Senator Bell.
Yeah, I'm just going to say I appreciate your willingness to work with me, and in spite of my comments, I'm going to vote for the bill because I think it's we go from nothing. This is a big step forward. I think it's a move in the right direction, and this is hard. But I appreciate your offer to continue work with me, and we'll see if we can tighten it up a little bit. But I know what you're trying to do is real tough.
Right. Thank you.
All right, we'll vote on the board.
Ayes 14, no 0.
All right, 14-0.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the
reported.
committee.
Does that bill need to go to finance?
No, sir.
Okay.
Hope
good.
not. We don't want that, George.
No,
Mr. Vice-
I'm just checking. I didn't want you to find out later that you were not there, so. All right, Senator Serval.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Why don't we do with the easy one first? About the multifamily inspection stuff. I think it's
740?
740, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a substitute on that. Somebody could move that. I would appreciate it.
All right, motion to adopt the substitute for 740. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, no. The substitute's adopted, so.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Senate Bill 740 is it's simply a bill to direct DPOR and the the Common Interest Community Ombudsman to conduct a work group to look at multifamily housing in light of what happened in Florida. And also, there was actually a partial condo collapse in my district, which probably many people didn't hear about. But, after what happened in Florida, there's a concern as to whether or not we have sufficient inspection procedures on our multi-story, multifamily buildings, and whether or not we've properly incentivized condo association boards to raise their assessments to a place to maintain their buildings properly. I think part of the solution to this has to do with liability and insurance, of course, because I'm a trial lawyer, but other people think there might be other ways to deal with it as well, like enhanced inspections and other things. But in any event, we need to have a hard look at it to make sure we're doing the right thing. Because as I pointed out, there was a bunch of people that were sitting around watching a football game about 5 years ago in my district when the corner of their building shifted down by about 4 inches and ended up having about 20 or 30 units condemned because it partially collapsed on a Sunday afternoon. And they had to jack the building all up and put it all back together again. And it was because the building wasn't being maintained properly. And as our buildings get older, we're going to need to see this more and more. I think the city of Alexandria has the highest density of these buildings and really wants to see this happen. I think a lot of other jurisdictions and stakeholders want to see it happen too, and that's what it does.
All right. Is there anything in particular that was significant with the introduction of the substitute that's different from the
Yeah, it originally was going to the Department of Community and Housing and Development, and then DPOR said everybody thought DPOR would probably be the better place to put it because they've got the Common Interest Community Ombudsman. That was the main change, I think.
Okay. All right. Okay. Any questions for the patron? All right. Is there anyone who wants to speak on the bill?
If you're in the Zoom room and wish to speak in regards to this bill, please raise your hand electronically now. Mr. Chairman, there is one speaker virtually.
All right.
Lucia Anna Trigonagi, please unmute and begin your testimony.
All right, Pia, we found you. So
I've been found. That's very nice. I'm sorry for that hard name, but it's a good Southwest Virginia name.
That's right.
That's right. It's nice to be with all of you.
I know it is. I know it is. This is so funny.
I know. It's very operatic, but it's nice to be with all of you. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for inviting the testimony. We've worked with the senator on this bill, and we support his efforts. This is a critical issue. Virginia actually is one of the states that has some of the best legislation on reserves for for common interest communities, but we think that that can be enhanced. Community Associations Institute has done a national study and has some recommendations which should facilitate the work of this group. And the Common Interest Community Board and the Department of Professional and Occupational Regulation has the right capabilities to do the work. And we are in support of the bill. So thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
All right. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? All right. The bill is before us. All right. There's a motion and a second to report the bill. Does this have to go to finance? Yes, sir. Okay. This would be report and re-refer to finance. So, all right. If there's no further discussion, we'll vote on the board.
Ayes 14, no 0.
All right. And then Senator Thurwell, you have another bill. Just add one to the number. So
Right, 741. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill is a little bit more complicated. This has to do with authorizing the use of facial recognition technology in law enforcement. You all may remember we passed a bill, I think it was either last year or the year before, that pretty much restricted that.
Yes.
And this goes the other direction. So, first of all, what the bill does is it says that and this bill, just so we're clear, is a combination of edits by myself and off a draft that it was originally provided to me by not one company, but by an association of these companies. And what I did was I borrowed from the radar LiDAR statute, which requires the Department of Purchase and Supply to certify the proper technology to use, and it directs DPS to provide an approved list of vendors that are allowed to do this. And they have to, in order to become an approved vendor, they have to show their technology is 98% accurate across all people and racial subtypes through NIST. NIST is the National Institutes of Standards and Technology. They're headquartered in Bethesda. I drive by them on the way to travel soccer, but they're a very nationally known, well-recognized NGO that does this kind of thing. So first of all, it has to be 98% accurate. Okay, so we're not talking about technology that's has accuracy problems. Number two, the bill says right now that this technology can only be used for investigating a specific criminal incident or a specific citizen welfare situation. So what the bill does not do is create some kind of a broad surveillance, or you can't use it for broad surveillance or monitoring. You have to have a specific case you're looking at, or you have to have a person in a hospital bed, you don't know who they are, and you're trying to figure out who's there, or you have a dead body and you're trying to figure out who that was. There's no ID on them or whatever. That's the only time you can use it, is for those purposes. Not just, you can't go and, put your girlfriend's picture in and see what comes back. You can only use it for that. Okay, and I'll get to that part a little bit later. And then after that, it says that the law enforcement agency, when they use it, they have to log all inquiries, who did it, when it was done, what they were doing, so for purposes of auditing. So people just can't use it willy-nilly, and there's no record of what had happened. In addition, at the end of the year, they have to produce an annual report that's public that explains what they used it for, and hits and misses and all that kind of stuff. The bill also specifically says that any of the results cannot be used as the basis for probable cause for an arrest. And it also says that the results that come out of it also can be used as exculpatory evidence. In other words, if the software, you put somebody's software picture in, and it comes back and it pops up a bunch of pictures of other people, or says it's not you or whatever, it can be used to prove your innocence. So it's important because most studies and data have shown that one of the most unreliable ways to identify a victim, identify a defendant, is to use a lineup.
Right.
Some of the most common false, IDs is that, that's the guy who did it, is because human beings are not very good at that, but computers are much better at it. And so from my perspective, this legislation will actually reduce the number of false convictions, false charges. It actually, I think, will enhance law enforcement. It will help find victims. In fact, we were talking about how, I don't know if you all read about the shopping cart killer, who I took particular interest in. But Fairfax County was
Little Hunting Creek. Is that where you found it?
Yeah,
No.
well, it was actually up on top of the hill by Belhaven. But by a car title lender, but another one of my favorites. But in any event, they can run his picture in their thing and it comes back with stuff, but they can't show it to the Fairfax County PD because they're not allowed to by statute. And this guy's already been charged with killing 5 people, and they have pictures of him in other places, but they can't show anybody because of the law we passed. So, anyways, I think it'll do some good things, and there's some people to testify and support. There's people that can answer your questions, and I don't know if anybody's in opposition, but that's what it does.
All right. Is any questions of the patron? Senator Evans.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'll defer to Senator Hashmi.
I have a question.
Senator Hashmi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Sorovell, I know this legislation is essentially just taking out what we had just passed last year, and it is really taking us in the opposite direction. And I was curious if you've had conversations with the previous patrons and the folks who really strongly supported the legislation last year, and what those conversations might have been like. Are they now supportive of what you're trying to do?
Well, the previous patron is no longer in the legislature, and I didn't reach out to her to ask her about it.
But Senator, this was a priority of our...
Oh, I'm sorry, there's also a substitute. Why don't we take care of that really quick?
I move the substitute.
All right, we got a motion and a second to adopt the substitute the patron didn't know about, but all in favor say aye.
Yeah, no.
All opposed, no. The substitute is...
Sorry, the substitute was published, so it was on the computer, but I'm sorry, what was the question?
Senator Hashmi, continue.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I was just curious about the position of the Legislative Black Caucus on this at this point.
I don't think the caucus has a position, but while I was sitting in my chair a minute ago, I was just given a list of, a specific change with a whole list of allowed uses that one member of the Black Caucus is suggesting in the body that sits in the eastern part of a building. Oh, well, I've talked to that member a little bit too, but anyway, I just got a list of stuff which I don't know if they're okay with, but it looked okay to me. But we didn't have time to draft it into an amendment. But I suspect it'll have that in there sooner or later. It's a little narrower, a more specific list than the two purposes I had in the language that I wrote, and so. I'm pretty sure with that change, it'll get even more support over there if it doesn't already have it. And I've talked to one of my constituents in the caucus, Black Caucus, who I think is going to be supportive of it, or I hear is supportive of it as well, as of 11:45 p.m. last night. Yeah. I can answer Senator Locke's question.
All right, Senator Evans.
I think Senator Locke had a question too.
Oh, okay. Yes, Senator Locke has a question.
I'm a member of the Black Caucus, so.
Duly noted.
Yeah, man. A question that several members of VLBC had to do with whether or not the limitations of the bill or what it's limited to. Specifically, is it limited to investigations only?
Yeah, it's limited to investigating a specific criminal incident or a specific citizen welfare situation. So 2 purposes. Again, the list I just got from somebody else gives me a list of even 10 more specific things that are probably narrower than that, but which I think look okay to me. I'm not.
Mr. Chair.
Looks okay to them too. So.
Senator Vogel.
I was just going to, I think, speak to in part her question, and that was, I asked that question when I had someone come and visit me about this, or at least it came up, and that is, it can be used for exculpatory purposes, but it cannot be used for, and maybe somebody here can speak to that, but as I understand it, it cannot be used in certain, I think, in circumstances in which you'd be concerned.
Right.
But you have somebody standing, the patron has somebody standing behind him who might be able to clarify that.
And if I might just add a little bit to that, information I was given was that it could be used for investigations, but it could not be introduced in court as basically the evidence, the proof for it. So.
I don't think there's a specific prohibition to it being used in court, but I would think it'd be very hard to use it to be admitted in court based on the rules of evidence.
Mr. Chairman.
All right.
I just had one more.
Yes, Senator Locke.
And this is not to be used, or another concern was this is not a profiling tool.
No, as I said, it can't be used for surveillance or monitoring. You can't just have it sitting out there as people are walking into a football game or something looking for hits. That's not investigating a specific criminal incident.
All right. Thank you. Senator Evan.
Yeah, I just want to be clear, Senator Sturville, because I was scanning the substitute. I had thought that I had heard represented earlier, or maybe it was a different bill in the building, that this would be like the shopping cart killer who unfortunately, that motel in my district where they found those bodies, that they would be using to identify the victim. Are you looking for suspects with facial recognition software?
Both.
Both, okay. And I saw this, I hate to just legislate based on something I saw on 60 Minutes, but there was a piece on 60 Minutes this summer about how some people being imprisoned due to facial recognition software that didn't work well. And what are the standards in your bill to make sure that we're not going to capture people of color more likely because of the limitations in the recognition of different skin tones and features?
Right. If you look on lines 26 through 35, that's the part that deals with that. But I think they can answer, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe those scenarios involve other types of technology that didn't have these types of certification standards in place. And as I said, the technology we're talking about here, the only technology that can be authorized has to be demonstrated to have 98% accuracy, and also has to show minimal performance variations across demographics associated with race, skin tone, ethnicity, or gender.
Okay, and then just to follow
Senator
up.
Evan, yes.
So I know that you've represented that we won't be blindly just searching public databases of people entering a football stadium or something. We're going to, under what databases will they be looking through?
My understanding is that they've got a couple billion pictures, or a billion pictures at least, that are from publicly available sources like Facebook or Instagram and that kind of thing. And
thank you.
All right. Yes, Senator Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Scott, on line 45, a match made through facial recognition technology shall not constitute probable cause for an arrest, but shall be admissible as exculpatory evidence. Explain, so nobody would put that on the affidavit for a warrant that the suspect was at such and such a location on such and such a time to try to get an arrest. I don't know what that means.
I think what it means is that I think you know what exculpatory evidence means. I don't think you're asking about that.
You know what that means.
Yeah, so.
I know what probable cause for an arrest means too, but
what I think it means is that.
What's the point? What's the point of this if you can't, if you're going to use it in an investigation?
To develop leads.
So then it would be excluded in an arrest? I mean, in an affidavit for an arrest warrant?
It doesn't specifically say that, but I think what that would mean is that this all by itself could not constitute probable cause to arrest someone. So you'd have to have other evidence to be able to rely on to establish somebody's identity for purposes of issuing an arrest warrant against them. Besides just the fact that you got a picture of them and this software says this is them.
I just think that's probably kind of poorly worded. It confuses me. I'm not the smartest lawyer in the room, but.
Lines 45 through 46. I can't remember whether I wrote that or not, but I wrote something like it. I wrote parts of this.
All right. Are there other questions of the patron?
I know, by the way, there's a law enforcement, there's a detective who's used this in the past before it was illegal who can answer some of these questions about how they used it and how useful it was.
Okay. All right. Anyone want to speak to the bill?
If you're in the Zoom room and wish to speak in regards to the bill, please raise your hand electronically now.
He's actually live. Talked to you yesterday.
Yes. Go ahead.
Thanks, Senator.
Certainly.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, thank you. My name's Christian Quinn. I actually was a detective a long time ago. I retired last year as a major from the Fairfax County Police Department. I headed up their Cyber and Forensics Bureau. And then within my organizational purview, I had the National Capital Region's face rec identification lead system. So I can speak to how it's been used in the Commonwealth here. Most notably, the questions regarding probable cause standard, we treated it as an investigative lead when the system was deployed there. And that was to be sensitive to the new nature of the technology and to put the onus on the recipients of those leads that additional work was required. The piece in 60 Minutes that was referenced, I credit former Chief Craig from Detroit for acknowledging the 3 negative outcomes that we've seen nationally were all due to poor police work, not poor technology. In Fairfax County, in Northern Virginia, we had more than, at the time of my retirement, more than 12,000 queries of the systems with no misidentifications, no negative outcomes, despite a myriad of success cases. And some of those speak to the, I just saw the limited use cases as well, but those really do fit in there. So when you hear about, obviously, crime in progress or a lead follow-up, we assisted in a case in Dinwiddie County where a young man was brutally killed and dumped in a ditch, and they had no leads to go on. We used the system, and within about 2 hours turned around a lead for them that ultimately was able to identify that person. And unfortunately, for that family, who's never going to see their loved one again, they were able to at least bring him home, and 3 persons were accountable for that and arrested for the homicide. Of also note, there was a bank robbery at a SunTrust where it speaks to, I think, 2 success cases that are for your consideration. Detectives and officers go there, they get an image from the surveillance, they run it through the system. They attribute that to a subject who was treated as a lead and went to an address that he was associated with, and they observe him wearing the same clothes that he just committed the bank robbery in. And I look at that as a 2-pronged success case. One is that you get a person who committed a crime of violence quickly and safely into custody, but the second is you do so without imposing on any of their community members that are geographically in the same location that fit the description or are wearing the same clothes. In this case, the suspect was an African-American man. But the technology has come quite a ways, and the NIST standard was referenced. And NIST in 2019 found that those demographic performance variations that were so prevalent before have been mitigated down, among the best algorithms, down to a nearly undetectable rate. And this bill is particularly thoughtful in that the language in their mandates and puts the onus on the Public Safety Agency that they can only use the best algorithms that are out there, and it only includes representation from industry that's offering the best algorithms, and that's going to limit those potentials as well.
All right, thank you very much. Anybody have any questions of the speaker? Yes, Senator Stewart.
So, Major, then you tell me what you think line 45 means, where it says a match made through facial recognition technology shall not constitute probable cause for an arrest.
So essentially that it's an investigative lead, it's a starting point, and it's exactly that, where examiner gets the lead, gets the return back, and basically that standard at that moment is basically, this is your starting point, you need to do more work, you send that to the detective or whoever's working the case, and then they've got to get more corroborating evidence, more information before they get a warrant, before they make an arrest, that you cannot do it solely on what the algorithm returned or what the examiner said.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Senator Stewart.
So, in your experience, would you include that hit or match on your affidavit for an arrest warrant as part of something if you had some other corroboration? And I don't like the word corroboration. If you had another piece of evidence, would you then use that on the affidavit?
When we stood up the program as a pilot, we did not, and I think that was a reflection of the technology was new. We wanted to make sure that it actually did what it was supposed to do, so we put a much higher standard in place where we had to do a whole bunch more work on the back end in order to get to that point. I think you could use it collectively with that other information, but in my own experience, when we deployed it, generally it never appeared on affidavits. It never went into an affidavit for a search warrant or an arrest warrant because the detectives had to do more work before they could get to that point.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
And so that's what my concern is. I've never been a big fan of using this, although I'm a big fan of law enforcement and very supportive, but I have specific concerns. I tend to trust Senator Searle because I don't really think he likes this stuff either, to tell you the truth. So I think he would draw it very narrowly. That's just my sense. But I have real concerns about that line because I see the ability to use it, or I think you all can, and it's unclear. And I don't think it should be used for probable cause for an arrest. I don't think it should be able to be put on an affidavit because I don't know how you authenticate the picture of that person. If I understand this correctly, you're gathering it from public databases. How do you authenticate that person, knowing that there's a lot of technology out there that you can Photoshop stuff? I mean, people put people's heads on people's bodies and bodies of animals, all kinds of weird stuff. How do you know that picture's authentic?
So I think it depends on the source. In our experience, we did use a closed system. It was solely arrest images from law enforcement agencies. But if you're using open source, again, I go back to by saying this is not a definitive identification. And to be clear, we actually used verified mugshot images that were coupled with an automated fingerprint return and still declared this is not a definitive identification. So again, we had a lot of success doing that. We did not have negative outcomes doing that. And I would submit to you that by putting that limit in place, you can still use the tools because so often, especially with bank robberies and some other things, there's really nothing to go on. I mean, if you go back to the old way, as Senator Sorrell alluded to, eyewitness identification can be very challenging and it leads to a lot of the wrong people getting roped into investigations that don't need to be. And we had an exoneration where someone brought us an image and we ultimately told the detectives, this is not going to be your person. They were incarcerated at the time of. So we did have some of those use cases where we showed this is a tool that is not just arresting people that we...
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Senator Stewart.
Senator Sorrell, do you have any objection to clarifying that it can't be used on the affidavit or something?
I just checked with them, and they said they had no problem with it, and I actually wrote some language if you want to try that.
Well, I don't know how the rest of the committee feels, but it sure would make me feel better.
It's fine with me. I think it would clarify it some.
I would like to hear it.
All right. Well, so what I wrote is that on that line 44, it would read, a match made through facial recognition technology shall not be included in an affidavit to establish probable cause for an arrest or a search warrant, I guess, which I think is what you're getting at.
I think I like that. I think I like that. What do you think?
I was going to say that if anyone asked, we would defer to our court's attorneys or the attorneys for Senate Judiciary to check the language and add any suggestions or make any additional suggestions.
It alleviates my concern if you keep it off of the affidavit.
Well, committee can approve language, and I'll get it vetted in the meantime if you want.
Okay.
Because I don't think there's another courts meeting between now and...
The rest of the committee may not be worried about it, but these things...
Senator Stewart, you want to offer
Why don't we run it by the...
this language as
I
an
move
amendment?
that amendment.
Okay.
Chair of the criminal sub of judiciary, run it by him.
All right, Senator Stewart is proposing that language, at least in concept, as an amendment. Is there a second? Second. All right, second. All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. All right, that amendment is adopted.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Senator Bell.
Question. Reading on line 157, it talks about state police shall develop policy and publicly posted on model facial recognition technology. And then in other sections, it talks about local departments have to develop this. So my question is, can they use the technology before the policy is developed and published?
I don't think so.
Because I was looking for that, and I may have not just found it, but I didn't really find it, and I have a little discomfort with it being used.
Yes, yeah,
without.
they would. If you look at lines 47 and 48, it says a local law enforcement agency shall post and annually update its policy regarding the use of facial recognition technology before employing such technology to blah, blah, blah. I believe it has the same language for the campus police because we just cut and pasted that.
Thank you. That satisfies my question.
All right. Are there any other questions? All right.
Chairman?
Yes, Senator Stewart.
I apologize.
Sorry.
That amendment needs to be made in several places, correct?
Search warrant language?
Yeah.
Yes.
The language we just adopted, in my motion would include.
Yeah, I think it needs to go
My
into the
motion would
campus
include
police.
that it be adopted in each place necessary.
All right.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah, it goes in 116 and 117 also. There's two
All
places.
right. We have adopted that amendment, so that's fine there.
Okay.
So we can take care of that.
I think there's
Is
some
there
other people in support
Yeah.
too.
Is there anyone who wants to speak? So.
Mr. Chairman and members
Yes.
of the committee, I'm John Jones, representing the Virginia Sheriff's Association. We support the bill.
All right. Thank you. Anybody else?
Mr. Chairman, there is one person virtually who would like to speak.
Okay.
Kevin Metcalf, please unmute and begin your testimony.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Kevin Metcalf. I've spent the last over 30 years either in state, local, federal, or military law enforcement, including 10 years as a prosecuting attorney. I now lead a team of investigators, both national and international, where technology touches criminal behavior. That is our focus. I'll be speaking at Interpol next month and at the International Law Enforcement Training Academy, the Cyber Crimes Academy this summer on these topics. I really have got to say I'm impressed with what I'm hearing. I believe the major who was speaking just a minute ago hit a lot of really key topics. I will try to keep this brief. My focus now is on facial recognition and other technologies. I don't want anybody to forget about the children. That has been my focus. We work homicides, terrorism cases, and everything. I've used facial recognition hundreds of times, and I can tell you that facial recognition last year alone was responsible for hundreds of recoveries of children who would not have come to the attention of law enforcement in any other way. Most of these are child sexual exploitation cases. And just to put it bluntly, these are images and videos of children being sexually abused and raped, and they're traded freely on the dark web. We never know where we're going to end up, but this is a vital tool. And if you really need to know the numbers, if you're not familiar with this crime, please look that up. But please keep this in mind as you move forward. The people who work child crimes, they need this tool. You already have an amazing head start on setting the safeguards. The exculpatory aspect, I'm not really sure I understand either. I agree with the senator who brought that up, but the safeguards that you're putting in place, it all comes down to the human element. It's not technology, it's human. It's bad police work. It's not poor technology, it's poor police work, and that's where the focus needs to be. We are assisting the NCJTC with putting together national policy and training on this and hope to have that out in the future. And I am available if anybody has any more questions for me or needs any other information.
All right. Thank you very much. Anybody have any questions for the speaker? All right. Thank you. All right. If there's no other comments, the bill is before us.
Move to report.
Second.
All right. There's a motion and a second to report. Does this need to be re-referred to finance? Okay, good. So, thank you. Yeah. All right. If there's no further discussion, we'll vote on the board.
Ayes 12, noes 0, abstentions 1.
All right. Ayes 12, no 0, abstentions 1. The bill is reported.
Hey, thank you.
Certainly. All right. We have a trio of patrons here. Senator Peake, Senator Suderline, and I don't know, is Senator Lewis here? So those are the three that have proposed legislation related to executive power of the governors and everything. Let me just sort of been sort of strategizing as to how to move forward on this issue. It's a very complex issue and something I think we need to spend some time on over a period of time. What I would like to do is to have you guys present sort of your ideas on this, and then we may have a motion to carry the bill over, and then we'll set up a special subcommittee to deal with it during the year. So, and we'll be able to involve the new administration in the discussion on that as well. So, but Senator Peake, you want to start off on that? So.
Very briefly then, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I brought a resolution last year.
Right.
And to bring us out of an emergency situation, because the way it is now, we can go almost a year and a half, year and 3 months.
Yeah.
Senator Suderline has a similar bill that he brought. He brought a bill last year. This is the same as Senator Newman's bill last year, and I know there's one in the House as well. We saw what happened. We get put into a state of emergency. Even though we're in session, there's nothing we can do about it. We've given up our sovereignty as a General Assembly, as a Senate, as a House of Delegates. There's absolutely no reason we should turn over all authority for this long, for a year and a half. And y'all know what the issue is. I don't think we should punt it.
Yeah.
I mean, we need to address it. And last year I said if a Republican wins, I'll still bring this bill.
Okay.
He did. You're
You're
lucky.
good, and you're good to your word.
And we still need it because it's what we do.
Yeah.
We legislate. We should not be in a year and a half long state of emergency.
Yeah.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. Dave Suderline brought Senate Bill 4. This is the third time I've brought this bill to this committee. It's been before you for over a year and a half, which, like Senator Peake said, which is about the length that an emergency order can currently last. The vast majority of states in the District of Columbia have all found ways to do this. The Roanoke Times wrote an editorial where they put up all the different ones and said, you know, this proposal is just like this state, this proposal is just like this state. But this was something that was done throughout. We managed to find ways to meet throughout COVID, way more times than I would have liked. We certainly could have considered that. I think it should be acted on. If it's going to be carried over, maybe for 4 years, because this current governor would never abuse the authority. And so we got nothing to worry about.
You may be right about that. So, but yes, it's just, yeah.
The administration has not come forward.
But I think
there's one sure way to find out.
But Republicans do on this committee.
Yeah. But I think, what we can do is involve them in the process here now, and I think it will be less politicized than it might have been otherwise. So I think that is also helpful. So,
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Senator Locke.
I would like to move that, are we going to roll them together?
We certainly could do that. So Senator Lewis was happy to roll his into one of your two bills there. So
roll them in to Senator Suderline's.
All right.
If you're going to send it to committee,
yes,
put it into Suderline's. If you're going to report it out, let's put it into mine, and put all three as chief co-patrons. I think roll it into Suderline's.
All right. Yes. Well, we could get motions. Yes, Senator.
Can I offer a motion first to roll SB 166, if that's Senator Peake's pleasure, into SB 4?
Yes.
As the first motion.
Yes. Okay. The motion and a second. We'll vote on the board. All right.
Ayes 14, no 0.
And now,
14-0. Okay, that's rolled in.
And now, Mr. Chairman,
Lewis's.
I'd like to move that Senator Linwood Lewis's SB 731 also be rolled into SB 4.
All right. Motion and a second to roll Senator Lewis's 731 into Senator Studerline's Senate Bill 4. We'll go vote on the board. All right. All right.
Ayes 14, no 0.
It's 14-0. All right, and Senator Locke.
And with that, Mr. Chairman, I would move that SB 4 be carried over for the year and that a study commission be set up to address this issue.
All right, and we'll work with you, Dave, on that so we can get consensus on things.
Substitute motion that the bill be reported.
All right, substitute motion and the bill reported. Okay. Motion and a second to report. This one, I think, does have to go to finance, if I recall. All right. We have a motion and a second to report, and we refer to finance. So we'll vote on the board on that, so.
Ayes 9, nays 5.
All right, this will, yes.
Let me reconsider that, or I just changed my vote. Oh, I'm sorry. then.
Yes, you're forced. We were,
I apologize. Never mind.
we're going to finance.
All right. Or at
Thank you
least,
so
or at
much.
least Senator Suderline is, so.
For finance.
Yeah.
That's your punishment.
All right.
Bring that up in this house. You just go to finance, like principal's office.
All right, Senator Cosgrove.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm going to make your life a little easier here. I have Senate Bill 636 that deals with hyperbaric oxygen therapy. I'm just not quite ready for prime time, so I'm going to ask that this bill be carried over.
All right.
Yeah.
Senate Bill 636. Carried over, so. All right, a motion and a second to carry over 636 is, we'll vote on the board.
Ayes 14, no 0.
All right, ayes 14, no 0. That's carried over.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I also have Senate Bill 145. Just very briefly, the genesis of this bill is that there's a lady in Virginia Beach who has a dock and a pier. All she wanted to do was redeck the dock and pier. No new piles, nothing. Virginia Beach, being the only jurisdiction that requests this, made her fill out this. It's 30-plus page Tidewater Joint Permit application that's submitted to the Corps of Engineers, the Virginia Marine Resources Commission, and to the local Wetlands Board. Neither VMRC or the Corps of Engineers wanted it. This cost her $4,000. And to make it worse, it took 6 months to get through, and during that time, as we all know, lumber prices doubled. So Senate Bill 145 is just an effort to say, look, if you have a dock or a pier and you just want to redeck it, basically you're just repairing what you already have, nothing new, then you don't have to do a JPA. We do have to work on the language a little bit, Mr. Chairman, and I have a proposed change to the language that makes it clearer, and I've been working, Joel, there you are. Been working with Joel on this.
Okay.
Starting on line 116, that I'm proposing now. Once an applicant has obtained a permit for the construction of a dock or pier, such applicant shall not be required to obtain a joint permit application to make alterations or to remove the structure or to repair that structure.
All right.
Second.
All right, motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no.
That's
All
the
right.
bill.
Yes, Senator Stewart.
Confirm this with Senator Cosgrove. In fact, the vast majority of these are by right anyway. I mean, you have to get the JPA, but under the Code of Virginia, you're allowed to do this. And so what he's proposing makes perfect sense.
All right.
I like the way he thinks.
Then we can't pass it. It makes sense.
Mr. Chairman, so if you can do this per the Code of Virginia, what are we doing?
Protecting her because it didn't work.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Yeah,
might,
Senator Cosgrove.
we're making it clear to the localities that a JPA will not be required for simple maintenance of a marine structure. That's it.
Mr. Chairman,
All right, Senator
just so
Reed.
I'm clear, so if I have pressure-treated pine on there and it starts warping and rotting and turning white, and I want to put that expensive PVC, I see Travis shaking his head and spend extra money.
Correct.
But I'm not adding to it, I'm not changing the structure, I'm not replacing pylons, it just lets you do that. Cut those pieces, put them back down, replace board for board.
That's correct, yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Stewart.
I apologize for taking up so much time. John, talking with staff, this is under the building code. This actually should be under the VMRC section, shouldn't it, where it talks about docks? Did you by any chance have a substitute done for this?
I don't have substantive, but I'll be more than happy to work on it between here and the floor. if that's,
I think that's right. And when,
I'm sorry? Oh, you've got it. I was told they didn't have, I'm sorry. Okay, there's a great substitute for this bill, Mr. Chairman.
All right, all in favor of the surprise substitute, please say aye. So, all opposed, no. All right, the surprise substitute is before us here, so.
Okay. They just put it under the Marine Code instead of the building code. So
All right, we got a motion and a second to report. If there's no further discussion, we will vote on the board.
Ayes 14, no 0.
All right, 14-0.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have one final bill for you, Senate Bill 719.
Okay.
This bill's pretty important. This legislation would authorize the Department of Military Affairs to pay the employer portion of health care insurance premiums for any member of the Virginia National Guard or the Virginia Defense Force that's experiencing a gap in coverage resulting from that service member being called to state active duty. And that's during a declared state of emergency for a period lasting longer than 14 days, and for which their employer is no longer paying an insurance premium to maintain their health coverage. If we have an extended emergency, these folks, they're citizen soldiers. They come to the aid of the Commonwealth, but their employer may not continue, they may or may not continue the health care coverage. This would just allow the Department of Military Affairs to pick up that part of the cost of their coverage so they don't lose their health insurance.
Right.
That's it.
All right. Are there any questions of the patron? Wait a second.
Yeah, I'm sure it has to be.
They're flashing
And there's
signs.
a great substitute for this one, too.
This is surprise substitute number 2.
No,
so.
actually, it's right here. It's my bad.
Yeah. All right. Motion is made and seconded to adopt a substitute. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. All right. The substitute's before us. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, that's pretty much the bill.
All right. Are there any questions of the patron?
I imagine this will probably have to go to finance.
I think so.
Yeah. All right. Anyone wish to speak to this bill?
If you're in the Zoom room and
Somebody
wish to speak in regards to this bill, please raise your hand.
Somebody behind you.
You got the colonel behind you. Mr. Chairman, before the colonel speaks, I would just like to speak on behalf of the Guard before he gets up to speak on behalf of the Guard that, we saw some of this as a result of when our Guard got deployed to the capital, nation's capital, and some employers barked. And this is a much-needed patch, and I want to thank Senator Cosgrove on behalf of Gambick and everyone else for carrying it. With that, when the appropriate time, I'll make the motion.
All right. Yes.
I'm Russell Woodley with the Virginia Department of Military Affairs, and we certainly support the bill. It's much needed. That's all I
Thank you
have.
very much. All right. If there's nobody else to speak, the bill is before us.
Move to report and turn to finance.
Second.
All right. We report and re-refer to finance. We'll vote on the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your
Ayes
courtesy.
14, no 0.
Yeah,
Oh, committee, thank you.
All right, Senator Hackworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'll try to be very brief, hopefully the quickest patron that you have here today. Senate Bill 60 is changing the date for localities to report from May 1 to August 1 to better align with the emergency management preparedness cycle. This was asked to be done through VDM, and basically this gives localities more time and helps VDM to develop more qualitative and quantitative methodology and analysis, because information will capture a whole year's worth of data rather than a partial year snapshot. And so it's just moving that reporting up 3 years, because they say that a lot of disasters happen over the summer and they're having to guess. And so having that date moved up will really help VDM in their processes.
All right. Is there anybody who wishes to speak on this bill?
If you're in the Zoom room and wish to speak in regards to this bill, please raise your hand electronically now. Mr. Chairman, there are no speakers.
All right. Motion to report
Has been made.
has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we got a second. All right. we'll vote on the board here, so.
Ayes 14, no zero.
So far, I win the prize, been the shortest.
All right,
Thank you.
yes, yes, thank you, so. All right. Senator Favola.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I'd like to speak to Senate Bill 290, and there is a substitute, and I just got it today. Okay, Mr. Chairman, this is a very straightforward bill.
Let's vote on the substitute. All in favor of
please
the
adopt the
substitute, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. All right, we adopted the substitute here.
Oh, okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So for state buildings, when they replace a roof, it needs to be an energy efficient roof, and then we go through sort of a definition of energy efficient, and we had some engineers look at this language. We don't think it's overly ambitious, but very doable. We also have the same language for local government. If they're to replace a roof on a locally owned facility, again, that roof has to be energy efficient, and we provide, I think, a very doable definition. The most interesting part of the bill gets you to page 4, which actually requires new school buildings and facilities that are either going through renovation, or if they're new, if the cost of the renovation exceeds 50% of the value of the building, they have to meet a net zero energy consumption standard. However, I know that this is, a great thing to legislate, but we do have a provision for a waiver. So a local government can do an examination of the cost and benefits, et cetera, and grant the school facility a waiver. Or if the school facility happens to be historic, they could get a waiver. This provision and the other provisions, so the solar roof provision in both the state and local facilities, would not apply until a project enters a design phase starting January 1, 2023. So that's the bill. I worked with many stakeholders, Virginia Association of Counties, the State Association of School Superintendents, and of course many environmental groups. The goal here is to really reach the Commonwealth's adopted energy goal of reaching a zero carbon emission by 2050. And to do that, we have to take steps like this.
All right. Are there any questions of the patron? All right. Is there anyone to speak to the bill?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Joe Lurch with Virginia Association of Counties, and want to thank the patron and the stakeholders with working with us on this bill. For the reason that she had stated, it's to help give us options for pushing for energy efficiency, particularly with the roof section, on the schools. But it does provide that exemption waiver, so when it's impracticable, a local governing body by resolution can go ahead and provide that exemption. And I can answer any questions you might have about the technical aspects that we worked on. So
all right, any questions of the patron?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Senator Ruff.
Wouldn't it work better to try to sell it to the localities rather than to force it down their throat?
That's a good question, Mr. Chairman, Senator Ruff. I think the fact that it is optional because of that Section D that provides that exemption, I think that gives localities the ability to go ahead and look at those options and to say to themselves, we can look at this and first look off at the overall cost to begin with, but then the other part of it that's something that a lot of our localities are doing, I know our schools are doing, is looking at the energy savings over time as they look at these projects. And so I don't know if that answers your question,
Mr. Chairman.
The answer is, but not well.
Yes, Senator Reed.
Is there anything,
Mr. Chairman, it's not a hard and fast requirement, and I think that's what we're getting at. So,
Mr. Chairman, the gentleman just spoke. Is there anything that prevents those localities from doing that now? And I'll give you an example. Orange County just built a new public safety building, and they used those standards for those same efficiencies that you just talked about. They didn't need a mallet to make them do it. Their board of supervisors said, hey, we're going to do this because its overall cost is going to save us. So they put in all the LED light bulbs and all the other things they needed to do. So is there anything that prevents them from doing it right now?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Reeves, I don't think that there is, that they could do that now.
The purpose of the bill, though, was to really encourage localities to focus more aggressively on it. There's also not a penalty for not doing this either. There's no enforcement. So this is really a policy statement more than anything else.
Mr.
All right.
Chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
All right. Anybody else to speak?
Mr. Chair.
Yeah,
I just had way down here,
yeah,
sorry.
Senator Kiggis. I'm
Just-
visually hearing something, so.
I just had a quick comment, and I agree with Senator Reeves, and it's already optional, it seems like, and that's kind of the consensus, so I just don't really know why this is needed, but I know that since I've been here the past few years, it seems like we're always passing bills about increasing sales tax of localities for schools because they are underfunded, we could say, and so I just feel like this is just another requirement, and I don't want to burden them anymore. I feel like they're already burdened enough, and we're doing creative things like increasing local sales taxes. This is one more thing.
Well, Mr. Chairman, working with the jurisdictions and the Association of Superintendents, I don't think they're viewing this necessarily as a burden because there are long-term energy efficiency savings. So when they're looking at the cost benefits of it, this oftentimes is the wisest thing to do. The average age of a school building right now is 40 years of age in the Commonwealth. So that would more than pay for whatever energy efficiency they happen to use when they built a building if we continue to maintain them for 40 years.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Donovan.
I'm so sorry, but I just have to say, I know it may be written with that intent, but my locality specifically sees it as something that would be a financial liability to them. So just to share that, I just don't know if it's ready at this point in time since there's so much concern about the cost to localities.
All right.
I don't think I could respond any differently than I already have.
All right. Anybody else want to speak? Come up and speak, so.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Connor Kish with the Sierra Club, and we do support the bill. And I want to point out that the purpose behind it is, and a lot of localities, to Senator, I believe it was Senator Reeves' point, are doing this, and they are finding that there is a quick turnaround in the savings that they are achieving. And one of the purposes of the bill, in addition to the energy benefit, the cost savings, is we have seen across the Commonwealth over the past couple of years, localities actually construct a new building, whether it be a school or whatever, that they plan to use for the next 40, 50, 60, 70 years, and it can't hold a solar panel. And that's a significant missed opportunity in our view. So we support the bill, and thanks Senator Favola for her work on it.
All right, thank you. All right, anybody else to speak? We'll get speakers.
Mr. Chair, there are speakers in Zoom.
Speakers on the Zoom.
Meredith Haynes, please unmute and begin your testimony now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am Meredith Haynes with the Virginia Grassroots Coalition. We're an organization of 40 groups across the state, and we support the bill. We support the bill because it would save energy and taxpayers' money. Being brief because I see the other speakers who want to address this, but I would like to highlight that the savings that state and local governments will access by being solar ready, they'll be able to get no money down third-party power purchase agreements. So saving there and also on lower energy bills. And we urge you to vote in favor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Meta Vulakanti, please unmute and begin your testimony now.
Thank you. My name is Mita Vulakanti, and I'm a student at Western Albemarle High School in Albemarle County. Albemarle County Public Schools started installing solar on schools using power purchase agreements in 2016 and has to date installed significant solar on 8 schools. The first 6 solar systems are expected to save ACPS $80,000 over the 20 years of the service agreement. More solar systems have been installed for additional savings. We're fortunate that our school district constructed the buildings so that the roofs can support the weight of the solar panels. This isn't the case around the Commonwealth, though. Senate Bill 290 would have new schools designed for the future. Some 45 districts in Virginia have installed solar using PPAs, and they are garnering the savings and plowing that money into improved education. Nearby, Orange County Public Schools have installed solar using PPAs and are able to generate nearly half the power needed for their facilities. Orange included roof restorations in their contract and will see $11.5 million in economic benefits from avoided costs for roof replacements and reduced demand for utility power over the next 25 years. Let's get these benefits for all Virginia school systems. Please vote to pass Senate Bill 290. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nora Shanahan, please unmute and begin your testimony now. Nora, we see you're unmuted, but we cannot hear you.
I'm Nora Shanahan, and I'm a resident and
Can you cut off
taxpayer.
we got feedback problem. Yeah, yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
We couldn't before, so.
Must have switched to Verizon.
So,
Can you hear me?
yes, we can hear you fine now, so.
She can't hear us.
Do you want to speak?
Oh, good. So you.
Murudula Rapaka, please unmute and begin your testimony now.
Hello, my name is Merdula Rapaka, and I am a senior at Chantilly High School in Fairfax, Virginia. In Fairfax County for fiscal year 2023, they anticipate an electricity budget overrun of over $1.4 million because of price increases by the utility. Net zero energy schools with solar proposed in SB 290 avoid energy price volatility because the price is negotiated upfront in the contract that is for 20 to 25 years. Building solar-ready and net zero schools creates a healthier learning environment that we can be proud to be a part of, and opportunities to learn about the energy of today and of the future, solar. When high school students talk about climate change, many of us feel despair. Between rising sea levels, increasingly intense natural disasters, and desertification threatening food and water sources, our world is going to be difficult to survive in, let alone succeed in, within our lifetimes. You have a chance to give us some hope by taking bold steps to reduce emissions with SB 290. Please vote to pass SB 290, and thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Susan Stillman, please unmute and begin your testimony.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak in favor of SB 290. My name is Susan Stillman. I'm a state and Fairfax County taxpayer, and I like to see my tax dollars spent wisely. Building schools and public buildings to net zero and roofs able to support solar are great investments. These buildings are expected to last for many years. The median age of a school building in Virginia is 52 years. There's a middle school in Bristol that's 104 years old. Public buildings should be built to be energy efficient from the start. Fairfax County Public Schools contracted for a study on the additional cost to get new schools built to net zero, and it's a minuscule 5%. The payback period is 10 years. That's a great investment. Power purchase agreements allow the school or government entity to buy clean renewable energy rather than purchase the panels themselves, so no upfront capital expenditures. SB 290 directs localities to do a net zero analysis, and if they can't justify the cost, they can opt out. I'm certain that once considered, net zero with solar will become the norm. Please vote in favor of SB 290. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. There's no further discussion. The bill is before us.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Senator Ruff.
I think that it's a laudable idea, but I think that most of our counties and localities have some brain functions, and if you put the information in front of them how they can save money, they're probably going to choose that direction. Therefore, I move that the bill be passed by.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to pass the bill by indefinitely. Is there any discussion? Okay.
Substitute motion, Mr. Chair.
Excuse me?
Substitute motion.
Substitute motion, yes.
Move to report.
All right, we have a motion to report. All right, we will vote on the motion to report. Substitute motion takes precedence, so.
Ayes 8, noes 6.
All right, ayes 8, noes 6. The bill is reported.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Senator Peterson.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I have Senate Bill 210, and I do believe there's a substitute. Yes, no? Maybe so.
All right, tell us what the substitute does, and then we'll take it up.
Is it distributed or?
We do electronic copies in this committee. It's posted electronically.
Okay, I got it. All right. Basically, this has to do with the issue of sort of an ethical issue about donations that are made to foundations or universities, particularly university foundations, by those people that engage in bidding, particularly what they call CM bidding, which is to say competitive, not competitive seal bidding, but rather constructive management bidding. The way the substitute works is we don't carve out CM. We make it all bid, so nobody's at a disadvantage. And it also is a fairly high numbers of 25,000 donation when you have a total investment or a total contract of over $5 million. And I think under the sub, and I'm going to need some help from staff,
Okay.
because we're marrying up with a version in another body down the hall. I think that the timing, can somebody explain to me how the timing works on this substitute for disclosure?
I'll move the substitute.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, we got a motion to adopt the substitute in a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. All right. So what were you explaining, Senator Peterson?
Thank you,
Okay.
Mr.
All right, so it's for the previous 5 years, and it's only for the winner. When do you actually make the disclosure?
Awarding the contract, signing the contract.
And it's made at the time of signing the contract. So it'd be when the contract is actually signed, then they would have to disclose if they had $25,000 donation over the past 5 years.
Okay.
And that's it. That's the whole bill.
All right. Any questions of the patron? Yes, Senator Stewart.
So, I support your bill, by the way, but I have a silly question.
Sure.
What does a $500 penalty do when you're talking about this kind of money? I mean, shouldn't people who participate in this sort of
You know what? I
good
think
old boy network
I
be
think the
barred
word-
from doing the work or something?
The word nominal comes to mind. I think it's more of just letting the public know that you might have a bidder who wins a construction bid, particularly a CM
Okay.
bid. So the fine is nothing. It's more a question of just letting people know, letting us know. Yeah. And this bill, by the way, is supported by general contractors and what's your group's name?
Virginia Contractor Procurement Alliance.
There it is.
There's no known opposition.
All right, is there, anybody have any question of the patron? All right, did we vote on the substitute?
It's adopted.
Oh, it's adopted, okay, yeah. All right, anybody want to speak to the bill?
If you're in
All
the
right, come
Zoom room
forward.
and wish to speak to the bill, please raise your hand electronically now. Mr. Chairman, there are no virtual speakers.
All right, either the two of you want to speak?
Just Matt Benke with the Virginia Contractor Procurement Alliance. This gets to the heart of the matter of construction management and alternative procurements, especially in higher ed. The vast majority of contracts in higher ed, 95% of all money that was spent in higher ed over the last 14 years was done subjectively. Only 5% was competitively bid. We know that when a contractor works with a school, they're not allowed under school policies to give a hat to someone, but they could take a step over here and give $5 million to a foundation. And so the idea is to just transparency. That's
Okay.
all it is.
All right.
So, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Senator
So
Mason.
we've heard you bring these things year after year after year. You feel people out there bribing our universities?
Yes. I'm kidding.
Let the record show Mr. Vinga didn't answer that question.
No, I don't feel that at all. I think that there's, in the code when it comes to procurement, it states clearly that there's no appearance of impropriety. But we all know that there are schools that have names, based on people's names. And there are some schools that on a subjective basis are awarding contracts to just a couple contractors. So that's the kind of stuff we want to look at. So we're certainly not saying that that's happening.
Yeah. All right, come forward.
I'm Tony Biller. I'm the president of Nielsen Builders in Harrisonburg, and I
Okay.
just kind of want to reiterate that.
all the universities have a fairly robust ethics program that is outlined so that folks, facilities folks cannot, like Matt said, I can't give a hat to a person because there's a concern that there may be some payback. I can't take someone to lunch because there's concern there may be some payback. But I can write a check for $100,000 to a foundation,
right,
and there seems to be no concern that there may be some kind of payback. So all we're asking for is, hey, look, if I make a contribution, I'm glad to. My company supports universities. We've got scholarships that we've endowed. We've got lots of opportunities. I just want to be able to have everybody disclose that so it's out in the public, out in the sunshine, so everyone knows I've given money. If I get contract work, I want everybody to be aware of it.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Senator
Do
Mason.
you have any sense or feeling or alleging that that's taking place at James Madison University?
I have no concern with the universities as personally, but I do know that prior to about a decade ago, all the work was competitively sealed bid. And when you have a competitive sealed bid, there's no issue. I don't care how much money I give. The low bid's going to get the job.
So that's really your axe to grind, isn't it?
Yeah, but when you have when you have subjective procurements where you are deciding on who gets work based on things other than competitive sealed bid, there could be an issue, and I want to make sure that there's sunlight on that issue.
Right.
Yeah,
Senator
can I
Peterson.
speak to this?
Yeah.
My father taught at George Mason, and when he passed, we created a foundation in his name, and we put a significant amount of money into it. Now, I've taught at George Mason Scalia, but I don't get paid. But let's say, for example, there may come a day I might work there, and then you all get rid of me, okay? And well, no, that's all right. But the point being is that to the extent we created a foundation, I think that's relevant. I'm not embarrassed about it. I think why not? Why not admit it? It's nothing to be embarrassed about.
All right. There's no one else to speak on the bill. The bill is before us.
Second.
All right, we got a motion and a second to report with the substitute. Go on the vote on the board.
Ayes 13, no 0, 1 abstention.
All right, ayes 13, no zeros, 1 abstention. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Do you have another bill?
Oh, I do. Which one?
I think
SB 716.
Ooh, I believe that's, 716 and, yeah, exactly. Hello, is Ray Lamura and, Ray, yeah, all right. I'm gonna let Ray Lamura take that because I'm doing this for a friend, but yes.
All right.
I've been pressing the service for this friend as well.
Okay, go ahead.
Senator Oliveira,
Mr. Chairman, members of the
how are
committee.
things in Fairfax
Before we
City?
get started, there's amendments that need to be
I move
promulgated.
the amendments.
All right. All right,
think
there's a
it's a
motion and a
substitute. If
second
we can
on
move the
adopting the
substitute,
amendments. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. All right, Senator, go ahead. So.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Ray Lemura, President of the VCTA, the Broadband Association of Virginia. This legislation is to create a study to go on at DHCD that is comparable in itself of where we have created the Virginia Telecommunications Initiative. This initiative was devoted to creating construction for broadband to those unserved. And as a consequence of that, you all have been lauded around the nation for having a process in place where once we receive these federal dollars, they went right out the door and started hitting the streets to those unserved. We still have work to do there. There are still 50,000 unserved. This legislation creates a study and to DHCD whereby they will create a plan where if there are federal dollars for affordability, Virginia will have a plan in place so once these funds come in, they can go out the door immediately. And I know Senator Ruff and Senator Hoshmi have been working on the Broadband Advisory Council for years, and these are issues that are coming to the surface. Infrastructure and affordability and adoption are the key issues that we're focused on, and that's what this bill does.
All right, any questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
Just a
Senator
question,
Reeves.
Ray, feds have already given us the 14, right? They've already issued that out. I thought there was
Not for
another.
the affordability. For the construction,
Just for the
yes.
construction.
Yeah, not for the affordability yet.
Okay, all right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
So
Senator Baker.
last year, we tried to bridge the gap. We thought that the program was going to run out, and the federal government ended up expanding the allotment and the program. Now there's more money coming, but this is the structure that allows us to be in place to try to draw down federal money as it comes and put it towards affordability. So this is a really big deal, and we appreciate Senator Peterson opening up a slot down the stretch that others didn't have.
All right.
So I move to report.
All right, we have a motion to report. Is there a second? Second. All right, any further discussion? This is, needs to go to motion to report and re-refer to finance.
So moved.
So, all right, we'll vote on the board.
Do all your bills, Jackie.
Yeah.
Ayes 14, no 0.
All right, ayes 14, no 0.
What's that? Yeah, great. That's fine. All right, the puppet master's taking me off.
All right. Senator Bell, do you have a bill? Either way.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is, I think, a fairly simple one. We've heard all the other bills that came as a result of the work group, the commission on charitable gaming. Right. This is another one of those bills, unfortunately, got incorrectly sent to the judiciary. That's why we're just now hearing it, not with the collection of the other bills. One of the issues that we discovered in looking at this is some of the organizations were running charitable gaming and had not identified themselves that they were doing that. So what this does is they have to get a permit, identify themselves if they're going to conduct charitable gaming, and also installs a fine if they do not. So basically, then we will know who's running charitable gaming, who is it. And I think Senator Reeves, if I can yield to him, wants to add something. He was a very close part of this commission who studied this.
Mr. Chairman, just for the.
Senator Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just so the committee understands, we have about $1 billion, maybe about $1.3 billion that we know about. And then we estimated through VDAX, there's probably $2 billion that we don't know about. So this is going to help us get all those machines stickered and figure out who has what, when, where, and how. So we can't go forward really to get a handle on charitable game unless we get this thing out of here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Is any questions of the patron? All right. Is there anybody who wishes to speak to this bill?
If you're in the Zoom room and wish to speak in regards to this bill, please raise your hand electronically now. Mr. Chairman, there are no speakers.
All right. The bill is before us then.
Second.
All right. We got a motion and a second to report and re-refer to finance. All right. And we will now vote on the board.
You shut up about it. Don't forget.
Ayes 14, no 0.
All right. Ayes 14, no 0. All right. Senator Lucas has a bill, Senate Bill 521. She would like to have her bill rolled into Senator Vogel's Senate Bill 353. All right. There's a motion and a second to roll 521 into 353. We'll vote on the board. All right.
Ayes 14, no 0.
All right, ayes 14, no 0. That's her bill. Senator Lucas's bill is rolled into Senator Vogel's. Senator Vogel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I have now is the two bills rolled together in the form of Senate Bill 353. And what this does is expand the eligibility for the Emergency Shelters Upgrade Assistant Fund. Right now, the eligibility, that funding can only go to local governments. And that creates a real hardship, especially in rural areas or other areas where they don't have a lot of government infrastructure. And in the case of needing to upgrade emergency shelters, they need more flexibility. So that's what the bill does. And this was brought to me by the previous administration.
All right.
And so I move. Oh, sorry, I'll let
Okay,
you ask for
there's not a
comment.
substitute or any amendments or anything, is there?
Not that I'm aware
Oh, there
of.
are.
Oh, there are?
Oh,
Oh.
other than that.
Oh,
yeah,
oh,
that's
right,
It will be
Okay.
that. So technically, it is a substitute. Substantively, it's not, so. All right, anyone wish to speak to the bill?
If you're in the
All right.
Zoom room and wish to speak to this bill,
Come forward, yeah.
raise your hand electronically now.
Is that for me? Okay, I wasn't sure if we were doing online.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, Chairman Barker, Senator Vogel, thank you for carrying the bill. Dylan Taylor, Virginia Department of Emergency Management. We highly support this bill and thank the Senator for introducing it. Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, we have one speaker virtually.
All right, one speaker.
Sherry Neal, please unmute and begin your testimony. Sherry Neal, please unmute and begin your testimony. Mr. Chairman, I believe our speaker is not here, so there are no speakers.
Move report. Second.
All right, we have a motion to report with the substitute. And does this need to go to finance or not? So.
No, sir.
Okay, all right, good. All right, just a report, Senate Bill 353, vote on the board.
Ayes 14, no 0.
Ayes 14, no 0. I think this takes care of all the bills except for Senator Evans' bill. Where is?
He does have a substitute that has been posted online, if anyone wants to read that while we wait.
This one has a little controversy, so I think we need to. No, we're not going to be here for the rest of the night. So,
He's got a bill.
Don't know. What's that? We can take a little pause, but I don't know. We can't take a too long a pause for me. Yeah. Yeah.
That's a good idea.
All right. Senator Evan.
This is Senate Bill 284, and there's a substitute that has been prepared. Substitute.
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a second to adopt the substitute. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. All right, the substitute's before us, Senator Evan, so explain the substitute, so.
Well, let me explain the situation,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman. Under our current law, tenants who breach their lease by not paying rent can be evicted even if the landlord has also breached the lease by not maintaining the home in a safe and healthy condition. And this is, of course, unfair. My bill removes the requirement that the tenant pay rent into escrow to raise a serious health issue as a defense in an eviction proceeding. And as an example, let's say a tenant calls her landlord that the heat is broken. It's the middle of January. After calling him every day for 3 days, there's still no response to the landlord, and the temperature in the unit is now below 40 degrees. The tenant uses the money she saved for the next month's rent to pay for a hotel room for her and her young daughter until the landlord finally fixes the heat weeks later. Under current Virginia law, the landlord can file an eviction case against this tenant based on non-payment of rent, but the tenant cannot raise broken heat as a defense. The tenant would have an eviction judgment entered against her. So when a landlord violates the contract by refusing to provide the safe, habitable property while still demanding the rent in full, tenants should be able to provide that violation as evidence in court without facing the high barrier of paying full rent into escrow with the court. Allowing tenants to raise this affirmative defense will increase the likelihood that tenants can pay the reduced rent, which increases the likelihood they can redeem and reduce evictions. Fundamentally, tenants should not be required to pay to simply raise a defense in court. It's an access to judgment issue and should be treated as such. 25 other states have a similar law, including Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Florida, and Maryland. In 2020, we had a similar bill from Senator Stanley on this warrant of habitability, and a bipartisan majority of the committee, including Senators Vogel and Donovan, supported Senator Stanley's version of that bill. Just as a reminder.
In case you forgot.
But the substitute takes us a little bit closer to what Senator Stanley had proposed in 2020. And I have the Poverty Law Center to testify, and there may be people on Zoom, but I just wanted to mention as a coalition that among the people I've been told are supporting the bill from earlier today is an array of organizations, including African Communities Together, Housing Opportunities Made Equal, Humanities Behind Bars, Institute of Forgiveness, Legal Aid Justice Center, New Virginia Majority, No Left Turns, Tidewater Solidarity Bail Fund, Tidewater Tenants' Rights, Virginia Organizing, and Virginia Poverty Law Center. I hope you'll just take a moment to hear from some witnesses.
All right.
Or I can answer questions.
Any questions of the patron before we take testimony? All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Christy Marrow with the Virginia Poverty Law Center. We thank Senator Evan for bringing this bill. I want to talk to you for a minute about what this bill does not. This bill does not excuse anyone from paying their rent. What this bill does is it restores the common law defense of unclean hands for tenants in Virginia. As those of you who are attorneys on this committee know, under the doctrine of unclean hands, if the plaintiff in a case has committed some sort of violation of a contract that he or she is suing on, then the defendant can raise that violation as a defense. And what the heart of this bill is striking the language in our current code section, in this code section, that prohibits a tenant from raising an unclean hands defense regarding habitability unless that tenant has paid the full amount of rent due into court. The reality is that tenants who have the ability and have the money to pay into court either A, don't know about the requirement that they must pay it into court until it's too late to do so when they're at trial, or B, they don't have them, or B, they bring an affirmative action under something called a tenant's assertion before they ever get sued for non-payment of rent. And so what this bill will do is allow that common law defense of unclean hands to be raised by a tenant. This is really an access to justice bill. It is about providing the tenant the ability to raise all relevant defenses in a case an eviction case alleging non-payment of rent. And if there are any questions about this, I'm happy to answer them. I will also say that in regards to the substitute and how close it brings it to the old Senate bill from 2020, what this substitute does is it changes two things. Number one, it restores the language that allows a court to terminate the lease based on all the evidence, but it does say that that termination can only be at the request of the tenant, which is slightly different from the 2020 bill. And then it restores the language that allows a court to order the judge to order the landlord to make the repairs, which the 2020 bill also did.
Senator Donovan.
Just a question, and that is, were those edits in the 2020 bill edits to get peace in the valley and build consensus among stakeholders?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Donovan, no. Those edits were actually as I recall, in the introduced bill in 2020. So there was another edit that you may be thinking of that was made at the request, my recollection is, at the request of the Virginia Association of Realtors, and that was to the notice provision. In the 2020 bill, there was an amendment made to require notice in accordance with existing law in the Virginia Residential Landlord Tenant Act at 55.1-1200. We have no objection. I don't think Senator Eben has any objection to that change if it was the will of the committee.
So, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Senator Donovan.
Thank you. Are you saying that, I keep hearing this comment about this was language that was in the 2020 bill. Okay, so it was introduced with this language, and that language was redacted as an amendment in the 2020 bill? Otherwise, how was it in there and not law?
No, we took this, what was introduced this year, we took it and we made some changes to mirror the 2020 bill more closely.
Correct.
I don't know if that's clear. You want to read that highlighted version?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Donovan, the language on line, line 41 of the substitute, where it says terminating the rental agreement, that language was in the introduced version of the 2020 bill and is in current law. The stricken language that you see on line 41 was also in the introduced version of the 2020 bill and in current law. So the difference here is that it changes that language regarding terminating the rental agreement to limit it to only if the tenant requests that. Similarly, on lines 43 through 49, that stricken language was stricken. Now, I will say I'm looking at a substitute from 2020, so I'm acting off of my recollection. I do need to note that. Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Stewart.
Question or two, if I may. So, Christy, you talked about unclean hands, and if I read the bill with the redactions, you could assert that as long as you'd paid the disputed amount of rent into the court.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Stewart, yes, that is the heart of.
So it's not an issue of being able to assert unclean hands. It's an issue of being able to assert unclean hands without depositing the money so the landlord knows that they're going to get it at the end of the trial.
Senator Stewart, that is correct. The vast majority of people that are being sued for non-payment of rent and have these conditions issues that we see are not able to pay into escrow.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Senator Stewart.
Christy, you do. I used to do some of this stuff, and maybe when I first started practicing law, and I don't anymore. But do you find that landlords who sue on unlawful detainer ever even get the rent that they were suing for? Or are they just hoping to get possession?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Stewart, I think things have changed dramatically over the past few years, thanks to some of the laws that you all have passed over the past few years. And I think the fact that a tenant can now pay everything that they owe, the amount of the judgment, the court costs, the attorney's fees, and the sheriff's fees up until 48 hours before the eviction changes the answer to that question. I would say a higher percentage of tenants are able to make the payment, and so landlords do get the money more often now than they did, say, 5 years ago before that law, or 3 years ago before that law was effective.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Senator Stewart.
So do you think even 50% of tenants pay the rent? Or you think it's much less than 50%?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Stewart, I cannot answer that. I have no guess. And I agree with you that it would be good to have that data, but we simply don't have it.
Mr. Chairman, one more question for Christie, because she's a lawyer, because I went to law school with her. I know she's a lawyer. All right, so help me with line 41.
Yes, sir.
And as I read that, it says, if appropriate, the court may refer any matter before it to the proper state or local agency for investigation and report and continue the action or complaint pending completion of such investigation and receipt of any resulting report. So if I understand this bill, they can allege a defense because of the landlord's action, not put any money into escrow, we'll call it.
Mm-hmm.
Then the court can say, I want so-and-so to investigate it, and an investigation can go on for 6 months, and the tenant can leave, and that'd be the end of it, and the landlord's property's tied up, and they never get the rent.
Mr. Chairman.
Is that a possible scenario?
Senator Stewart, I would say in that case, the landlord would the tenant, as you know, has an ongoing obligation to pay the future rent. If he or she breaches that obligation while that investigation is ongoing by the code enforcement folks or whoever it might be, the landlord can bring a subsequent action to on that new rent that is not paid. I will also say, Mr. Chairman, Senator Stewart, that again, heart of this bill is removing the escrow requirement so that at the time of trial, the tenant is not barred from bringing this defense. I understand very well what you're getting at, which is that this provision that says, hey, you can ask for an investigation could draw this out, in my opinion, unreasonably as well. And so I think that is almost an issue that one could segregate from the core of what Senator Evans is trying to do.
Thank you.
Question, was the 2020 bill, did that have something to do with allowing the tenant to make changes? And reduce it?
That's right. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I don't understand the question. Allow the tenant to make.
If it was a heating unit, should the tenant buy the heating unit and put it in and then get reimbursed from the landlord?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a matter of fact, there was another bill by the same patron at the same time that you all passed that has been law since that time.
Right.
We colloquially refer to that as the repair and deduct bill, and that does in fact allow a tenant who has given notice to their landlord that something is broken to repair that at his own or her own cost and then deduct that cost from the rent. I think a key distinction between that and what this bill is trying to do is that you all capped the amount of the repair at $1,500. And the more serious issues, which is what this bill really addresses, such as a completely broken heating system, a broken air conditioning system, et cetera, often cost more than $1,500. I just had to replace all of my ductwork, and it was $6,000. And so that repair and deduct law has a limited application, and it is intended to be limited to small repairs.
Small repairs. All right.
Chairman.
Yes, Senator Mason.
So since the crux of this bill is you don't have to escrow the rent that you owe in order to withdraw the defense, I had what seems to be a bad idea that I offered to both of you that said, provided you are no more than 2 months in arrears of your rent. Can I ask you, and then I'll ask the other side to just tell everybody why that's such a bad idea?
Thank you, Senator Barker. Senator Mason, it's not a bad idea. Unfortunately, it does conflict with the ultimate goal of this legislation, which is to ensure that everyone has equal access to justice in our courts, including an equal opportunity to raise the defense of, in this case, unclean hands. And so to use a time limit and say that you don't have to pay if you're 3 months behind in rent or 4 months when you're sued, you can't raise the defense of unclean hands. But if you're 2 or 1 month behind, then you can. Again, seems like we're not providing equal access to justice. Mr. Chairman, it's our position that that type of distinction is not tied sufficiently to the ability to raise the defense. What this is really about is one of the main things that this bill tries to do is to ensure that there is a real check on, and landlords who don't belong to any of the organizations that are represented behind me today, but rather who do skirt the law. And some of them, unfortunately, have a practice of doing so, and they are able to do it time and time again, to not make repairs, to keep their homes in poor conditions. Yes, their rent is lower. That is how they get their tenants. And if the tenants are not allowed to raise these defenses, then this behavior goes unchecked. And that's one of the main things we're concerned about.
And Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
one
Senator
follow. So you're right. Those are the people we need to go after and figure out how to get them, not these guys. But by law, they have 15 days to respond, right? So you've paid your rent and say, I got a hole in my roof. You have 15 days supposedly for them to respond.
And Mr. Chairman, Senator Mason, that was a change that this bill made. The existing law is 30 days. We certainly don't have an objection to returning that to 30 days. Just as, so that it's just, again, not the crux of the disagreement among the stakeholders. But there's no objection on our part to bringing that back to 30 days.
That makes my bad idea worse, so thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Senator Bell.
I'm concerned about 2 points. One, the response period going from 30 days down to 14 is a huge reduction. But I think more importantly, and this is a question I would have for you, if a court does decide to refer it to the state or local agency for investigation, what do you think the average time frame for that investigation would be?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Bell, I wish I could answer that. I don't know. I certainly think if the committee were amenable to putting a time limit on that section, that certainly makes sense, that under no circumstances would such an investigation cause a delay of trial beyond 60 days, something like that. Again, I don't think that's the crux of this. I wish I had a better answer for you. I'm sorry, I just don't have that data. And I think it also varies significantly by jurisdiction. I'll also say that the legal aid attorneys tell me that in most jurisdictions, these unlawful detainer cases based on non-payment are going to trial within 4 to 6 weeks of filing. I know that's not true in Fairfax. I know that's not true in Northern Virginia, but I just wanted to let you know in most places that seems to be the case.
All right.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hashmi.
Thank you. Just a quick question, well, maybe not a quick question for Christy. We have a particularly egregious case that's ongoing here in the Richmond area. It's in my district, Southwood Apartments, and the tenants have been trying for years to get action on uninhabitable situations with rodents and mold, and the issues just have not been addressed. So, Christy, I was hoping you might be able to address how this this legislation might help in a case like that where there's been ongoing situation and the landlord simply hasn't taken any action to address the concerns of the tenants.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, Senator Hashmi, it is, and I do know something about that situation. It is very fortunate that there was rental assistance through the federal government, and then prior to that, through the state, for the tenants living in that apartment complex, because I know many of them have been struggling during the pandemic to pay their rent. Had that assistance not been available, many of those tenants, all of them who have been struggling to pay the rent, could have been evicted, could have been sued for an eviction for non-payment of rent, and would not have been able to raise any of those conditions that you just mentioned had they not had the rent to pay into court. And my understanding of their situation, again, because of the pandemic, they have been struggling. So this legislation, on the other hand, would have allowed them to raise all of those issues regardless of whether they had paid the rent or not.
All right. Any other questions or comments? All right. Anyone wish to speak to the bill?
Mr. Chairman, we have one speaker virtually.
Okay.
Monica Sarmiento, please unmute and begin.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Monica Sarmiento, and I'm the Executive Director of the Virginia Coalition for Immigrant Rights, a collaborative of 45 member organizations that fully support this bill. We were overwhelmed with the direct stories from community members who've told us story after story in regards to bad landlords and being forced to really deal with uninhabitable situations and paying their rent. Early this year, we had a press conference where we had several members from the African communities together, membership, testify their stories, including Mr. McKellar, who lives in Southern Towers in Alexandria, Virginia. And he told of a very terrible cockroach and rat infestation in his unit, where he had to pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars over a course of 2 or 3 times to be able to go ahead and have that addressed, because the landlord was unresponsive and he has a toddler and a newborn. So these are things that are directly impacting folks and their families, their health and well-being. And we fully urge that the committee vote yes on this bill. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Isabel McLean, please unmute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I am Isabel McLean with Housing Opportunities Made Equal. We're a statewide nonprofit dedicated to fair housing, and we urge the committee to support Senate Bill 284. Low-income or rent-burdened renters have few good options if their home becomes uninhabitable through no fault of their own, in cases where the landlord refuses to fix the problem in a timely manner. And many tenants fall behind on their rent in these situations because they have to take emergency measures to keep their family safe, such as purchasing prepared food if their kitchen is not safe or healthy, or moving to alternative housing, such as going to a hotel. So tenants would not incur these costs if it were not for their landlord's negligence. And we believe that evidence of that negligence is directly relevant when landlords try to evict these tenants for non-payment of rent. It's just the basic, in this situation, both parties violated their contract, tenants not paid their rent, the landlord has not kept the home habitable, and we think it's wrong that the landlord's transgression is being barred from being brought before the judge. So we ask you to support Senate Bill 284. Thank you.
Anisha Sheedy, please unmute.
Hi, thank you. My name is Anisha Shetty. I live in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and I am a tenant advocate with Tidewater Tenants' Rights, which represents the 7 cities of Hampton Roads. We strongly support SB 284 because it helps balance the uneven power dynamics of landlords and tenants in courts today. As it stands, a tenant can't sue a landlord via a tenant's assertion without first keeping up their end of the lease, which is paying their rent. But currently, a landlord can sue their tenant via an unlawful detainer without keeping up their end of the lease, maintaining a safe and habitable property. When sued, tenants should be able to mount a conditions defense where relevant. This gives them more full, fair, and necessary representation of living situations. Tenants should have equal access to justice. They deserve the same rights to defend themselves as landlords have been entitled to. Thus, we support SB 284. Thank you.
Marika Lewis, please unmute and begin your testimony.
Hi, my name is Marika. I'm the Housing Policy Analyst at New Virginia Majority, and we support SB 284 for all of the reasons previously stated. And I also want to emphasize again that at least 25 other states have adopted warranty of habitability provisions, as this bill is doing, allowing judges to consider a landlord's failure to make essential repairs during non-payment eviction cases. So we hope that this bill gets reported out of committee so tenants can pay a more fair amount for rent during non-payment cases when their landlord has refused to make essential repairs, as well as be able to bring up that defense by not putting rent into escrow until the judge orders them to pay a certain amount of rent. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak here? No. All right.
Sorry. Hi, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. My name is Erin Barton. I represent the Realtors, and we respectfully oppose this bill. We are very grateful to the senator and to the stakeholders. They worked with us for a very long time to try and reach consensus, but unfortunately we were unable to do so, much like the bill in 2020 that everyone keeps referring to. However, 2 years ago, we did work with Senator Stanley and the Poverty Law Center on the right to repair bill, which we do think would apply in this situation. Gives the tenant the right to use their own money to make a repair for a life-threatening condition if the landlord fails to do so. This bill, however, would allow a tenant to stop paying rent in response to what the tenant believes is a breach of contract by the landlord, with no requirement that the tenant pay that money into the court until the judge determines if the landlord is actually at fault. And for that reason, we oppose the bill. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Tommy Herbert with the Virginia Apartment Management Association, as well on behalf of our sister organization, the Apartment and Office Building Association of Metropolitan Washington. We respectfully associate ourselves with the comments from the Virginia Realtors. We oppose this bill. We hope that you will oppose this bill. As Senator Stewart mentioned briefly, our members report that the escrow process is extremely necessary in Virginia and report very, very high levels of delinquency the longer that a judgment goes unfulfilled. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Could I ask them to please comment on my bad idea of why not give them 2 months, hoping he gets to court, rather than.
So the idea is if they're behind 2 months?
You can exercise this defense if you're no more than 2 months in arrears of your lease. So you're not, the landlord's not living up their obligation. You've asked them to fix it. You're trying to get to court. She says, look, we deserve this right whether you've paid or not. But you know the tenant doesn't want to pay for something that's not been done. So the concept here is, and maybe it's just a dream, that you can get in court in 60 days. Maybe it needs to be 90. I mean, but a period of time that I don't want to be paying someone who's not not fixing the hole in my roof. Every time it rains, my bedroom is a swamp. And so rather than paying an escrow, just say, you're not going to pay until you get this thing squared out and have a judge take a look at it. They say you ought to have this right, period. But I don't know.
Well, just to clarify, we are definitely not asking that the tenant pay the landlord, right? We want this money paid into escrow for the court to hold until a legal determination is made. I do see your point where we're trying to get with the 2 months. There are several other problems with the bill that I think would probably need to be fixed for us to go along with that idea. So your idea isn't terrible, but but there would need to be a few more changes in the bill for us to agree to that. So,
Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Senator
would this be something that the Housing Commission could study?
It certainly would. I think I know the chair of the Housing Commission.
I'm no longer the chair. So
okay. The former chair then. All right. Well, if there's no further comments, the bill.
I would just to wrap up, I'd say this in no way removes the tenant's obligation to pay rent. It merely allows the court to reduce it in an uninhabitable situation. if you have rats and rodents, or if you have no plumbing working and you have to move out and incur expenses and can't afford to also do escrow at the same time, that's what this is about. It's not about relieving the tenant of the requirement to pay rent. It's just about even. Because under the way it is now, if I can't afford to pay rent because I moved out to avoid the rodents or needed plumbing or needed heat, the landlord can still sue me for failure to pay rent, and I can't raise that as defense now. So that's what this is about.
All right, the bill is before us. Anyone want to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I like Senator Locke's idea.
Second.
We have to PBI.
No, you could carry it over.
Carry it over with a letter.
Carry it
to the
over
Housing
and
Commission.
refer to
Yes.
the Housing Commission.
Yeah, that's my motion.
I would second his motion.
All right, we have a motion to carry over.
Continue.
Continue it, yeah.
Continue with the letter.
With a letter to the Housing Commission to ask them to study it during the year or so. All right. Is there any further
That was short
discussion?
and painless.
Yes. All right, we will vote on the board then, so.
I
12
do-
ayes, 2 nays.
All right, 12 ayes, 2 nays. So that motion is adopted, so we will work
I
that.
thank the committee, and I want to thank the realtors because they're following me back to courts to testify for my other bill.
Oh, okay.
That's good, that's good. Way to go.
Short memories in this building.
That's right.
Yes.